Welcome to another episode of Spilling Ink, the talk show that takes you behind the book to meet the authors and professionals in the publishing industry. We are back this week with a new author to introduce you to, the wonderful Kim Tomsic, who's got a brand new book coming out that she's excited to tell us all about. Kim, go ahead and let us know about your new book.
Hi, Katie and Jason. First, thank you so much for having me on your show. I really appreciate it. So the 1111 Wish is my debut middle grade novel. It's for 8 to 13-year-old readers, and it's about wishes, magic, and dares.
I love the kitty cat on the front.
Thank you.
So now, where did the 1111 Wish come from? What sparked your idea for that story?
Well, when my daughter was in middle school, and as well as my niece, Marlo, they would make wishes at 11:11. And so they would always call me out and say, oh, it's 11:11, make a wish, make a wish. And I didn't even know that was a thing. So there's that tied into when I was a kid, I would see those retro cat clocks. In fact, here, we'll just talk about it. Those clocks with the ticking eyes and the swishing tail, they were just so magical to me that when I all of a sudden put wishing at 11:11 to something magical, it just naturally came together.
I like
that. Sounds awesome. Now, what was the age range again? You said 8 to 13?
8 to 13-year-olds.
Okay, so is this a chapter book then?
So in children's literature, a chapter book is a younger age. Any book like Clementine would be a chapter book, or the Junie B. Jones books would be chapter books. Magic Treehouse, that would be chapter books. That would be the younger age group. 8 to 13-year-olds is a novel, just like 13 to 18-year-olds is a novel.
Now, let me ask you this, because in standard novel length for the adult market or even the young adult market, they usually target around 60,000, I think, for young adult, and 80 to 100,000 for adult. Is there a target word count range for middle grade?
Typically 30 to 50,000 words. Now, keep in mind, Harry Potter is considered middle grade. So that breaks outside of that genre or outside of that word count. My book is 58,000 words. So it is, it tends to be in what's called upper middle grade.
And when does your book release?
February 13, 2018. I can't believe it. It's been so many months where I've had a book coming, or actually years, because I have some picture books that are coming out as well in 2019 and in 2020. So
I saw that you have Guitar Hero coming out?
Yes, Guitar Hero's in 2019. And my elephant book, which doesn't quite have a title yet, is 2020. The elephant book was the first book that sold in 2013. I had a contract, the whole deal, but because that's a fully illustrated picture book, the wait is on when the illustrator is finished with their last project, the specific illustrators that we would want.
Wait, now, so you make a picture book.
Okay.
And it gets bought by the publisher. However, you don't have any pictures in it yet.
Correct.
So how do they know what this picture book is going to be? How does that work?
You have a really great editor who has a vision, who wants to buy the book. So if you're an author, there are many author illustrators. So if you're an author and you write a picture book of text only, your agent sells it to the publishing house, or you sell it to the publishing house. And the publisher, the editor who gets it, who gets this vision in their head, also has a vision of exactly the illustrator they want, or maybe a few illustrators in their head, so they can see the whole vision of the story, because they don't want your text and your illustrations to be, just redundant. They want your text to tell one story and your illustrations to tell a parallel but similar story. They don't want you to say, and I closed the red door, and then there's a picture of a lady closing a red door, because the child needs something more. They need that bigger experience. They need to have something else come alive with those pictures.
So how did you get into the children's book market? How did that happen for you?
I read always to my kids since they were babies. I read books to them. I remember having a babysitter laugh at me when I had her babysit Noelle, who was a baby, not even crawling. And I was like, okay, and here are the things and and make sure you read these 3 books to her tonight. And she just started laughing. She was like, wait, what? And I'm like, yeah. So I always read to my children. And Cayman, my son, was in 3rd grade, and we fell in love with books by Richard Peck. And if you haven't read Richard Peck's Newbery winning honor books, oh, so incredible. As an adult, I would read them over and over again still. Once we finished his books, I thought, okay, I'm going to write a book like Richard Peck so we can keep reading his books. And I tried that. And obviously imitation of art is a way to get started, but I'm not really, I have my own voice. I would love to write like him, but I write completely different than him. So anyhow, I wrote my first book, and then I wondered what was next. So I hired a professional editor to edit the book, and then when the professional editor was going to be finished editing the book, they'd send it to me and then get on the phone with me, and we would spend half an hour on feedback. So I got on the phone, really excited, hearing the feedback. And I'm like, okay, so is it ready to send out? And she's like, not at all. And it was a really honest statement, and I appreciated that. So then my next question was, is there an organization I can join so I can learn more, so I can get involved more, so I can figure this out? And she said, yes, join the Society of Children's Book Writers and Illustrators. Had I not joined that organization, I would never, ever have figured this industry out. It really was and it's an all volunteer organization. It's a nonprofit organization, but I mean, I've met I met Richard Peck through that organization. I met Lori Hall Sanderson. I met Gary Paulson, Judy Bloom. Yeah, I mean, many, many, many wonderful people through that organization. So founded by Lynn Oliver and Steve Mosier. So anybody who is a children's book writer, shout out to SCBWI.
So they really set you on your path, huh?
It 100% did, because with that organization, I attended conferences, and it's where at the conferences and all those mini classes, I learned about voice, setting, pacing, time clocks, the business of publishing, inciting incidences, breaks into Act 1, how to break into Act 2, like all the little nuances. I'm still learning. I went to a conference in New York, and Sarah Pennypacker, she's the author of the Clementine series. She talked about how the brain works for readers. And if you give the reader all the information, then their brain shuts off. Just like if you listen to music and you figure out the beat and the rhythm, then it can become background music and you don't listen anymore. Well, she says the brain figures out patterns. So you need to leave some blanks and let the reader's mind do some work to make those connections. I mean, just little tricks like that I keep adding and keep adding. So 2009 was the beginning of my publishing journey. And it's when I joined the SCBWI. Then a year after that, I joined a critiquing group, and I've worked with 2 different critiquing groups over the years. And more than anywhere else, my writing has come alive thanks to critiquing partners who can tell me what is working and what's not in their opinion, and give me the reason why it's not working. So rather than, oh, I don't really like this chapter, it's your voice isn't ringing true in this chapter. For example, would a 12-year-old girl really say this sentence? And then here's examples of when your voice is fantastic. And yes, that's exactly what a 12-year-old girl would say. So those opportunities have really shifted my writing. And then at conferences, there's always professionals like I had a one-on-one critique with Wendy Loja from Random House. I'm not sure if you've seen the ads for Everything, Everything. That's a book, that's a movie coming out. So it was a young adult novel first, and Wendy Loja is the editor on that. She's incredible. You can look her up. She's an editor. She's written movies, etc. So her critique for my work was you have to build your ordinary world first so that you can draw clear lines between what's happening in your ordinary world and then what's different when you have had that inciting incident and then your break into act 2. What can you draw lines to distinguish those two worlds? And I said, but I just want to get to the good stuff right away. She goes, everybody wants to get to the good stuff right away, but you have to remember it all has to be good. I'm like, oh, okay.
That's a good phrase there.
Right? Right? So good.
Jason, you're just sitting there nodding in the background, just taking it all in.
Yeah, I'm just thinking about everything she's saying. I really like it. Now, who was it that you were saying gave the talk about readers' brains and how they expect things and how you have to challenge them?
This is from Sarah Pennypacker's own book, which is called Clementine. And it's her very opening page. She said, I have had, and by the way, this is a chapter book. So it is for 7, 8, 9-year-olds. I have had not so good of a week. Well, Monday was a pretty good day, if you don't count Hamburger's surprise at lunch and Margaret's mother coming to get her, or the stuff that happened in the principal's office when I got sent there to explain that Margaret's hair was not my fault. And besides, she looks okay without it. But I couldn't because Principal Rice is gone trying to calm Margaret's mother's down. So the filling in effect that the brain does is, it's funny, she says, Margaret's hair is not my fault, plus she looks better without it. Had she said, I cut Margaret's hair, that's like, oh my gosh, that's funny, kind of ish. But the fact that the brain had to work like to make those connections, that's what she means about the brain doing the filling in effect.
Does that make it more satisfying for the reader, do you think, when their brain works like that?
It does make it satisfying because the brain scientifically is proven to stay on rather than lulled into, okay, I know what's going to happen. Oh, she cut her hair, so of course Principal's going to go out and calm Margaret's mother down. Like it doesn't, there's no lulling time because you're staying on and aware. Lisa Crone is the author of a book called Wired for Story. And and in that book, she talks with neuroscientists about how the brain works and how to keep the brain staying on and what writers need to do to make that happen. Again, so fascinating.
Wired for Story?
Yes. By Lisa Cron.
He's taking notes over there. I can see.
I am. I'm going to have to check this out. It sounds fascinating.
Oh, it's so fascinating.
Yeah, not all of us have the talent like Katie to just write a perfect manuscript the first time. Some of us have to do our research.
Oh, gosh, I have to write 96 drafts. I am not a lady either.
All while doing yoga experiments.
Exactly. All the while hanging upside down. All the blood rushing to your head should help the creativity, though, shouldn't it?
It does. It does. Speaking of how many drafts, I was listening to you guys talk about that. So I worked on at least 40 drafts of this book with my critiquing group, and then another 10 drafts with my agent, and then another 3 drafts with my editor.
Wow.
Oh my goodness.
Like
and this is all on the 1111 wish?
All on the 1111 wish, yes.
Can we talk about gaining an agent just for a moment? Because sure. Kim, I'm on the agent search right now. Kim actually helped me revise the 15th, 16th draft of the query. It's now on like its 100th draft.
I hope this isn't a big secret for everyone, but Kim is Katie's sister. Boom.
Now we know.
Boom. Yes. Yes. Kim is who Katie has always aspired to be. And now here, we're about to make it happen. Right now.
Are we doing 2 truths and a lie? That's a lie. What are the other 2 to choose from? Or she always wanted to be a dog. Or she lives in Nevada. Or is it Nevada?
Well, now, let me ask you, did you...
That's the great debate, how you say Nevada.
I know.
Nevada.
I got corrected immediately upon moving here on how you say it, because I used to say Nevada.
It's Nevada.
Oh, no. It's Nevada.
You could sing it like that song, Nevada, una na.
Oh, sing it for us.
No, not anymore. Katie's giving me the head shake. That means she's going to push the dump button soon.
All right, I'm going to crack the whip. Back on topic here. Back on topic. Let us talk about
wait. No, Katie, wait. Katie. Okay, Kim, did you read to Katie when she was little?
I did not.
So you read to your kids, but you didn't read to your little sister?
Katie,
no, I annoyed the crap out of her. Remember the radio? You used to call it a living radio.
You were the living commercial, but you never, ever, ever. This is the truth. This is the truth part of the other two were lies. The truth is, Katie never annoyed me. I can never think of one time as a child. Now, as an adult, no, I'm just kidding. As a child, never even one time. She was the sweetest and cutest little one. So cute. But we would, as a 16-year-old, I'd put her in the shopping cart and take her grocery shopping. And we could roll by anything and she would sing me the commercial for it. You're not. I'm like, wow.
That's awesome. Well, now I love hearing these stories from your childhood, but I've got to keep you ladies on topic here.
Okay.
Now, we're trying to find out a little bit more about how to get an agent. Kim, what can you tell us about that?
Okay, so I think the number one thing for me was going to conferences and making those personal connections. So when I went to my first conference with SCBWI, I attended different sessions to vet agents to see who would I like to work with, because agents, that relationship is like a marriage. That's your forever relationship unless you fire your agent or your agent fires you, which you don't want you don't want to go through that agent divorce. So I attended different sessions with different agents, and there were most certainly agents I would not want to work with and agents whom I would want to work with. But I met my agent and I fell in agent love. I was like, I want her to be my agent one day. And so then I pursued her for 5 years, that particular agent.
So a lot of us who are out here might be searching for an agent and querying dozens or hundreds of people even. And it gets to be at a certain point where you're maybe just desperate to find someone that wants to take you on. Whereas listening to you, it sounds like you had a little bit different approach where you're kind of like, okay, you're vetting agents, and that doesn't sound like what a lot of us are doing. It seems like a lot of us are just trying to get in front of the eyes of an agent, not necessarily vetting them. How did you approach it that way? How were you able to do that?
I think because I showed up with an unfinished manuscript, I wasn't ready to look for an agent at the time. And I went to a conference with 1,200 people. I'm not shy, so I had lots of conversations. And I realized that there are nightmare stories, and I didn't want to get myself in one of those situations. I wanted to really understand what I was doing. Now, when I say I was vetting agents, it wasn't that they were knocking on my door like, oh, please send me your manuscript. I wasn't there yet. I did not have the skills to land an agent yet. And the first time I queried my agent, it was a very polite no, but I still wanted her. So I kept working my craft till I could have that agent. My advice on seeking an agent, I know everybody can't just, whip out hundreds of dollars and go to a conference. So if you can't go to a conference, take the time. Agent research takes almost as many hours as you put into writing the book, and it's important. You want to read Writer's Digest. They have interviews with agents all the time. Writer's Digest has a free weekly email where if a new agent is on the market or an agent that's been on the market for a while is looking for clients or suddenly open to queries, you pay attention to that. On Twitter, sometimes agents will have pitch wars with hashtag pitch war. So you can pay attention to what's going on there. Read articles. For example, I saw Crystal Allen. She is the author of How Lamar's Bad Prank Won a Bubba-Sized Trophy. Really great middle grade novel. Her agent is my agent. So I remember when I was looking and researching agents, she wrote an article on her blog on Agent Appreciation Day, 50 Reasons I Love My Agent. And I'm misquoting the article because it was a while back. But the fact that I saw Jen's clients loving her was a positive sign. Read the back of books, the acknowledgement section in books, because in the acknowledgement section, authors often give a shout out to their agent and editor, especially if they enjoyed working with them. That's where you can really find who represents who. Publishers Weekly, subscribe to the magazine. You could get Publishers Lunch. It's free. It's a email that can show up in your inbox. I can't remember if it's every day or every week, but that's another thing that you can take a look at. You really want to dig into reading agent interviews. And WI, so for children book writers and illustrators, they publish agent interviews regularly, and somebody will be there. Read the agent's profiles. Now, the agent's profiles sometimes aren't perfect. It might say, oh, and I love historical fiction, but then you read the books they represented and they don't seem like, in the historical fiction category. So yeah. And then work a long time on that query letter. I would send 5 or 10 out, and then I would make some adjustments if you're getting 0 response. If you're getting form letter responses, that's something to consider too. If you're getting some responses and they're personalized, then pay attention to what's being said. A lot of times a query letter will have send your query plus the first 10 pages. And so in months, if I were querying a children's book and I got a response like, oh, I really liked the idea of this topic. However, your voice doesn't really sound like a 10-year-old boy. So I'd be like, whoa, so my voice is off. If I got 2 responses with that same kind of statement, I would not send another query out. I would go back and revise and work specifically on voice. If you're getting personal responses and saying, hey, yeah, send me your novel or send me the first 50 pages, and you've gotten them interested in the query, that means there's nothing wrong with the query. You've had a multiple requests for it, but then you're not getting further. Maybe I would work with a new critiquing group. I might work with a professional editor. I would wait and see what kind of, response I'm getting back. Like the pacing's too slow or it feels too thin, which means, what too thin is code for is your stakes aren't high enough. Things like that. The big thing I want to say with querying agents is it's hard because it's such a subjective thing. Books are such a subjective thing. I am pretty certain I'm the only one who hated reading The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo. That was so painful for me to read, and all the tiny details of how the fence was built and what it was made out of. And I died. But obviously that bestseller did great. I would have been the agent who passed on that. And there are plenty of books that I would have been the agent who passed on. And then there are plenty of books that I am just in love with, So it's subjective taste. And that's part of that research of really narrowing down. And that's why going to conferences helps fast track you, because somebody may say, I'm interested in fantasy. But then you realize what they're interested in is light fantasy in a contemporary world rather than, high fantasy like Caraval, which is a great book.
I definitely agree with you on the in-person networking aspect of going to conferences. When you're sending out an email, it's like cold calling. A lot of people tend to not pay as much attention to that. as, you know, going to a conference and maybe you're doing drinks with editors one night, or you're doing a pitch session that you've scheduled. You're actually face to face with somebody and you can actually make a real connection. And it may not end in something, but you can pitch your book at that point and you might get a, oh yeah, let me see the pages. And then you can send that email with, hey, I met you at such and such. Here's the pages you requested. And it'll get a little more attention than just maybe it's their assistant looking through the slush pile.
That is exactly true. So true. My editor for my elephant book, I met at a conference, and there was an unofficial scavenger hunt at this conference. And whoever won the unofficial scavenger hunt got to sit down with an editor and agent who organized the scavenger hunt for cocktails and just pitch your book.
Awesome.
It's so awesome.
That is the best.
So at the conference, there were hashtags for the conference, but then the scavenger hunt was posted with the conference hashtag and then moved to here's the unofficial scavenger hunt. And I was like, I am winning this. So I formed a team of strangers who were only allowed on my team if they wanted to win. And sure enough, we won. And I got to sit down with this group. I pitched my book. I am sure 10 other people probably told me this in my writing lifetime, but I never heard it until this editor said it to me, because I was like, oh, I have this book and this happens and this happens and this happens. And I'm thinking, this is the most exciting thing that's ever happened. And she's going to be so excited. What she said to me was, it sounds like a lot of things are happening to your character rather than your character making things happen. And that was such a light bulb moment, because your protagonist needs to drive the plot. And instead, I thought fun things happening was the answer. Yeah. So that was a great aha moment. And she was not interested in that book, but she gave me her card. And a year later, I had an idea for the elephant book. I pitched it to her and she said, I would be and I was like, I don't know if you remember me. We had cocktails by the pool, blah, blah, blah. And she was so kind. Of course, I remember you, and tell me more. And so I sent her a draft of the elephant book, and she goes, I would be interested in this, but you have a lot of problems with subjective clauses. So for picture books, a clause that is subjective to what's coming next is not necessarily a great formula for young minds.
Now give us an example.
An example would be, whenever Katie went to the grocery store when she was a child, she sang all the commercials. Maybe that's not correct. I'm the worst grammarian, so.
So am I. That's why I wanted the example.
Yeah. So anyhow, so then I took the book and I fixed it and resent it to her. And she wrote me back and she goes, oh, I see you fixed the subjective clauses, but it took on so many other problems. Thank you, though. So it was a pass. And I was like, dang it. About 6 months later, I went to a conference. And at conferences, they have sessions called first pages. First pages are when either one or a panel of publishing professionals read the first page of your novel or picture book, whatever manuscript you're working on, and they read it aloud. If it's one person, they tell you if they would turn the page and keep reading based off of one page. If it's a panel, I've seen first pages where there's a panel of 5 people, 3 editors, 2 agents. And this is it can be harsh, but what they do is a reader reads the first page, and as they're reading the lines, anybody on the panel who would stop reading and not read any further raises their hand. And if no hands are raised by the time they finish the page, that means, all right, you kept their interest. If hands go up, if all 5 hands go up, then done. Your first pages are done. So I went to a session on first pages, and I didn't have anything in the pile, which was really freeing, because being able to listen and hear the feedback on why they stopped reading pages, why that would have gotten thrown away, why they loved it, why they move on somebody else's work, took it being personal away. And it was just a session on 35 first pages read and why they kept going or why they stopped reading. During that session, I had the clarity and the aha moment of what was going wrong with my story and what was needed to make my story come alive. Again, another example of why being in those conference sessions so helps, so different than just reading a craft book.
So what was it that was going wrong that needed to be fixed? Do you recall or no?
I have one recollection. So my story, I'm going to call it The Elephants Came. It's a true story about a man and a herd of elephants and this friendship they formed. And it's a true story. It's one of the most beautiful stories I have ever heard. I was so excited about it that I had to write this book. The problem was, when a child reads a picture book, there needs to be somebody that they can put themselves into, so that they're walking in those shoes and having that experience somewhat. And so I had this man and I had a herd of elephants and nowhere for the child to implant themselves. And then suddenly I changed things with the elephant so the child could feel themselves in the hooves of the elephants.
Now I'm gonna say this, and I've been trying to carefully draft how I want to say this so it doesn't sound funny or in any way rude to you, because I don't intend it this way. I don't read middle grade, and I don't read picture books anymore with my kids. They all read on their own now. And when I think back to children's books, in my head they always seem so simple, like there was hardly anything to them. But listening to you talk about it, sounds like there is a lot more to think about, a lot more going on than I might, as an adult reading through it, even ever notice.
Right.
And I think that's incredible, because listening to you, I'm like, wow, there's just, it seems like if you had the mind to create a good kid's story, you would write out a good kid's story and it'd be like, ta-da, it's done, it's good. But it sounds like there's a hell of a lot of research that goes into it too.
A good example, I think, and actually, Kim, it's a book you sent to Hunter for a Christmas present. I think it would be a good example of what we're talking about here. It was called The Black Rabbit, and it's actually one we read a lot because it's one of the kids' favorites. It's actually become Zoe's favorite. And through the story, the adult reading it knows the Black Rabbit is the shadow, but it's given such a personality through each page.
You just spoiled the whole freaking book for me.
I'm sorry.
What the hell?
What the hell?
I know it was next on your to be read list. I'm so sorry, Jason. But I think that illustrates the point, is that you're giving a high concept to something that is seemingly simple, because the children will take more time to warm up to it.
It's incredible what picture book writers do. Like, if you guys get the book Beagle, please get the book Beagle, and you'll have to. It's Beagle, Beekle. That book won the Caldecott Medal last year or the year before, and there's probably 700 words in that whole book, maybe. But if you take time with that book, it will probably take you 4 reads till you really get it. It's incredible what illustrators do to make a story come alive, and the nuances of what else is going on. And of course, there's so many layers in novels. Read Okay for Now, read Winter Girls. Those are, children's books. Hunger Games is a children's book. Anything 0 to 18 years old is children's books. Oh, a book by Donna Cooner called Skinny. It's a book about a girl who is 300 pounds, has this voice in her head she's given this voice, the name Skinny, is always talking to her, telling her basically she's not good enough. And It's incredible. If a book, especially a children's book, can either be a window or a mirror for a child that helps children have an extra friend to go through experiences in life. And so, yeah, it's quite a privilege being a children's book author.
My daughter, who's, God, did she just turn 8 or 9? She's either 8 or 9, my youngest. Okay.
And
Okay,
Father of the Year.
She just finished reading Wonder on her own a few weeks back, and I haven't read it. I won't go see the movie because I hate bawling in movie theaters, and I know I would. She was so, and this is the first novel that she's been really excited about reading. She'll pick up books at the school library and say, "Oh, I really want to read this because it has a cool cover." And they read books in class, of course, but this was the first book that she was really excited about reading. And she would be reading on the couch while I was sitting on the chair reading something else, and she'd have tears in her eyes, or she'd be laughing at the book. And it was such an incredible thing to see. It really amazed me watching her read this, and I was really proud to see that. But yeah, that was another one that, for me, my kids are really, I don't want to say they're cold, but I have 4 kids, so they're all a little bit cynical because they're used to picking on each other. So they most of the time they don't get very emotionally invested in books and movies. Things that might make me cry, they're just like, whatever. Okay, so the dog died and so did the guy. Who cares? As I'm blubbering my eyes out. So it was really neat to see a story written for children that was able to emotionally move a child that age. I thought that was really, really cool. But anyhow, so children's authors are awesome. You guys are great. Now, you gave us a lot of good information here in the last 20 minutes or so, but I wanted to go back and touch on a couple things here. So, The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo.
Yeah.
Now, first, I really enjoyed the story. However, I will admit that I spent a good deal of time skipping over a lot of extraneous details that I didn't need. Most of the family tree that he spent like 3 chapters describing, I'm like, out the window. I don't give a shit. I need the next action sequence. I need something to happen. And you were talking about one of the things you realized needed to happen was that your characters needed to be driving the plot. And that's funny. Katie, you were asking me what kind of things I'm working with the publisher, and that's one thing that we've spent a lot of time going over is different story types and what readers expect. Certain types of stories, mysteries, for example, a lot of times the protagonist is going to be reactive. Things are happening that he's trying to figure out that we as the reader may know a little bit more than him, but not always. Whereas in what I'm writing right now, the protagonist has to be proactive, has to drive the plot. It's mandatory. It's necessary for a thriller to work. Otherwise, you don't have that suspense and that forward motion. And there are a couple of good articles that are accessible to anyone on different story types and what readers are expecting. And whether you're writing young adult, or children's books, that might be interesting for viewers to take a peek at and see kind of okay, I'm writing fantasy, but what are readers expecting of me? Even though I'm writing this, are there certain, things that I could change to make it better? So I think that's a good point. Yes, we could spend a lot of time talking to you about these things, but I don't want to overwhelm people either by dumping all this info on them. They'd be like, okay, you're on your own with it. Because you have so much knowledge to share.
There are exceptions. That's not a rule. I have things that work for me and my phase of writing right now that Stephen King sure could write a book where the protagonist isn't driving the plot and something else is, and he would do it just fine. Mm-hmm. That's what I know right now. So I don't want anybody to say, oh my gosh, that's the only rule that's going to make it work. So yeah, I'm glad you brought that up.
Take a look at the hero's journey. If you compare that to like a Star Wars, for instance, since everybody's big on Star Wars right now, the first Star Wars movie that came out, Luke was very reactive. He wasn't driving anything until the very end when he was actually in there making that lucky shot. He was letting everything happen to him, and he was taking it in as his character was forming through the whole story.
You're absolutely right. And that is one of the reasons. And I really enjoy Star Wars. However, I really enjoy the new ones. I like the new take on it. I like where it's going. However, I loved Rogue One. Now, for those of you out there who haven't seen Rogue One, the Star Wars movie, I won't give you spoilers. However, the main characters were very proactive. They were doing things. They were making things happen. They were going on a secret mission, and it was very fast paced. I thought it was excellent. Whereas, as you just mentioned, the older movies, they're really reactive. The rebels are letting the shit pile up on them. The Imperial forces are doing these terrible things, and it's just, after they happen, okay, then Luke does something, or then Han does something. So yeah, that's a good point. Star Wars was incredibly successful. Is that going to make your story successful or not successful? Who knows? They're
genre specific too. Certain genres, like you just said, expect certain things to happen in a certain way.
Yeah, and that's for sure. So Kim, you talked about getting into these sessions at cons, and one of them was the first page session. Now, my question for you is, because I could buy a ticket to go to a conference just like anyone else in the world could, how do you get yourself in a situation where you're in one of these sessions where you have an opportunity for an agent to read that first page? Is that something that you set up through someone else, or it's just open to the public, or how do you get into that? How do you put yourself in that position?
So a conference typically will have a schedule. And if one of the things on the schedule is first pages, there will be a supplemental page on how to submit your first pages. And on huge conferences, a 1,200 person conference, I don't see that. Well, actually, there'll be breakout sessions for that. So there'll be instructions that will say your first pages can have a maximum of 16 lines, double spaced, 12-point font, Times New Roman. Put it in this box when you arrive at the conference, face down, and you follow all those instructions. And then if 200 people show up, they only have time to read, if it's an hour session, probably 30. If it's a small session that 30 people show up, they might read them all. And, so it'll unfold, however, based on size and the structure that they have.
So now what kind of conference is this you're talking about?
Writers' workshops.
Okay. I just wanted to clarify that for viewers, so that we're talking about literary type conferences and not Comic-Con.
Oh,
because when we hear conference, a lot of people are thinking cons and Comic-Cons.
Oh, no. Yeah. So writers' conferences.
Okay.
We've delved really into the nuts and bolts of the industry. Kim, you've got a book coming out in like 2 weeks. Tell us what you're doing to prepare for your big release.
Okay, so I'm having a book launch party at Boulder Bookstore on February 22nd. I'm having a book launch party in Denver at Book Bar on March 3rd at 1:30 p.m. I plan to get online eventually and do a pre-order campaign. Look, I have some fun stuff. Look at this stuff for their pre-order. Wait, am I there? Watches and bookmarks, because people need to wish at 11/11, right?
That is so cute.
And my girl in the book is a math whiz. So let me tell you more. So the girl in my book, her name is Megan, and she's a math whiz, and she's just moved to a new school, but she didn't move at the beginning of the school year. She moved 2 weeks after school started. She walks into her history class, and there's one of the retro cat clocks like we talked about hanging on the wall. And it's just like a clock her grandma used to own. And it was in her grandma's kitchen. And so she remembers a rhyme her grandmother would say, make a wish. So Megan thinks, what the heck? What do I have to lose? So she makes her 11/11 wish, discovers that wishing is real, magic is real. And now she wants to use magic just to try to fit in. But what she ends up doing is promising more and more and more promises. So she keeps upping the level of promises, and then slowly but surely she starts taking on cat consequences.
Nice.
I
I like it. I like it.
She gets a magical magazine. It gives her everything she wants, but more and more consequences. So,
Okay.
All
I like
magic
it. Well, it sounds
comes
fantastic.
yeah, it is. Thank you.
Yeah.
It's so fun. I'm really excited about it.
Now, is that one part of a series? Are we on book 2 yet?
So, no, when I signed with HarperCollins, I signed a 2-book deal, but the first book, so what I understand in my 2-book deal is my brand is light fantasy. Light fantasy means it has magic, but it's grounded in a contemporary middle school. Whereas high fantasy, you're in a whole different magical world. So my book 2 is light fantasy. I'm not even going to tell you the title yet.
She almost did, though. It was right on the tip of her tongue.
And that leads me to my next question, though, too, because there's a lot of waiting involved. I mean, you have a contract, obviously, and they're looking for X amount of books for you for this series, for this brand. But even with that contract, there could be years between when it's written to where it sees the light of day. How do you deal with that wait?
So the waiting has really been with the elephant book because I was waiting for the illustrator to be available. And I'm sorry, I don't know if it's been publicly announced yet, so I can't even say who the illustrator is, but he is a rock star. So excited. So worth the wait, definitely worth the wait. For Guitar Hero, we have Brett Hellquist. He has done the cover for so many of the Lemony Snicket books. I cannot wait to see. I think I might get to see some sketches or something maybe in February. One of the things the publisher does is they keep the author and the illustrator separated. The author is not dictating to the illustrator what they're doing because the illustrator is an artist who has their own craft, just like as I wouldn't want the illustrator dictating the words to me. So, with picture books, there is more of a waiting game. I remember the author of Fancy Nancy said she waited 5 years because the illustrator she wanted was not going to be available for 5 years. So she just waited, and she's glad she did because that is
I love that series.
Right? Quite a successful book. Okay, so for the 1111 Wish, that's not a series, that's a standalone book. And then the next thing I'll write for HarperCollins, Katherne Tegen Books, will also be a standalone light fantasy. And the waiting, it's interesting because right now I'm feeling so busy that I don't have time. I wish I was waiting for something. But the waiting game is most successfully met by working on something new. If I am excited and in a project, it doesn't matter. I'm happy to just put that aside because I've got to work on this. And which is exactly why it has not bothered me to wait on the elephant book. Not at all, because I've been busy. All of a sudden I, had, so I signed the contract for the 1111 Wish. It will be 2 years in March. So it's almost 2 years from the day I signed the contract to the book coming out is pretty typical for publishing in the children's industry.
And that's a really good point and good advice, not only for authors, but for anyone and everyone. The easiest way to get through something, especially something that's stressful or sad or weighing heavy on your mind, is to get busy doing something else. When you think about it, if you've ever been in a bad breakup, which most of us have, the easiest way to get over that is just to keep busy, maybe go on a couple dates or find a new hobby, something you enjoy doing. Start a new book. I'm writing a new book right now that is completely unrelated to what I'm supposed to be writing because I'm like, you know what? I just want to write something different while I'm waiting for all this stuff to happen. So
I like it. We're book talk and psychology all wrapped in.
I've just got Dory in the back of my mind. Just keep swimming. Just keep swimming.
That's exactly right. You got it, girl. You got it. Just keep doing
That's
shark
great.
stuff. Sharks never stop swimming, and you shouldn't either.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Well, this
It
has
can be
been
hard though to work on something when you're anxious about something else, though.
It is. But it can be especially freeing as well. If you can get yourself into that zone, you can't always do it, but if you can get yourself into that zone, it can be really freeing.
I, for one, have not met my usual word count goals because of the anticipation from the whole querying process. So even though I'm working on my book too, it's not coming nearly as fast as it should. It's harder for me to get in the zone when it comes to sitting down and getting my writing done. So, I mean, I'm trying. I'm actively working on that second book, but in the back of my mind, I'm like, did I get an email yet? Do I need to revise this again?
Yeah. And same with me with editing. The editing has taken up so much of my time and my brain power that it's been difficult to write. So I'm moving along at a snail's pace, but at the same time, I don't have a deadline, so I'm actually doing it just for the enjoyment at this point. Once it gets to about the halfway mark, then it's like, okay, shit's getting real again. I got to actually crack down and make this thing become a cohesive project. But I don't know. The first half of the stories are usually the most enjoyable for me because it's all about discovery, and I'm not even sure where everything's going to go yet. Although this time I have been. And I hate to say this out loud even, I've been plotting a little bit. I know.
No.
I know it. But here's the thing. I haven't written any of it down. It's all out there. And you know how erratic my brain is. So
Yes.
I could forget it all tomorrow. But yeah.
Now there's a good question for you, Kim. Are you a pantser or a plotter?
She's a plotter.
I am a bother.
No, you're a plotter. I can tell.
I spent 6 years probably pantsing this book, and then not less. I spent a lot of years pantsing, and then I read Save the Cat by Blake Snyder. Save the Cat has 15 story beats, like opening image, inciting incident, break into act 2. Bad guys close. Oh, fun and games. That's my favorite part. Fun and games. Midpoint. Bad guys close in. Like things like that. Those beats.
Okay.
And I went back through my book and realized, first I started watching movies to see if they had those beats. A movie that was not satisfying to me was missing 3 of the beats. And I go, oh, I get now why this movie is not satisfying. Movies that are satisfying to me almost always have all 15 beats. They've nailed them. It's the most, it's what helped my novel finally find legs. Then adding to that, if you read Robert McKee's book on story, it talks about turning a scene. How if one scene in a book ends on a downbeat, maybe the next one goes on an upbeat. Like the main character, thinks that everything's going to work out. If I just do this, then I'm going to win the girl or whatever it is. And so he's on this high and doesn't win the girl. So back to the low. Then all of a sudden something else happens and you start moving to an upbeat. He's pursuing something different. And then, so you have these waves of turning a scene. And so I just tore my whole novel apart, looked for the beats and looked to see where I could turn a scene. And by fixing those, I had entire chapters I threw out where I discovered, holy crap, nothing's happening. Or I had chapters where I just needed to rev it up a bit. Does every single scene, does my character want something? Do they think what does the character think's going to happen? What actually happens and what's at stake needed to be in every scene. And that really transitioned from a lot of flat moments to something happening. Okay, so am I a pantser or am I a plotter? So now I'm working on this new novel, and I took the 15 story beats from Save the Cat, and I really thought through what I wanted to happen in those story beats. One of the things that I cannot do, and I think I refuse to do, is plan anything for Act 3. Because I really need Act 1 and Act 2 to speak to me to see how it's going to unfold. I've talked to many writers who just need to know the beginning and how it's going to end, and then they can fill it all in. For me, I need to know the lie my character believes about themselves that drives their decisions or poor decisions. And I have to understand and think about what that inciting incident will be. And I really want to understand what my ordinary world is so that I can create my upside down world. I pay attention to those things and see what comes alive. But I drafted out some things in story beats and then started writing a whole different story the other day. I was like, okay, well, that was a good exercise. I have dreams of one day outlining a whole story and actually writing that.
Wow.
That would be incredible.
That makes me cringe. I can't do that. And for the same reason you just kind of touched on, you can draft something that sounds like a wonderful story, and then when you sit down and write it, it doesn't speak to you, and you don't write that story. So what I end up doing is I give myself a to-do list. And it's very loose. These are the goals I need for the story. This is what I hope my characters do, what I need them to do to get from point A to point B. But it's never any hard, fast, this is exactly what happens. And Jason, I had sent you my to-do list for my last story that I was writing. And it might have really loose things like one character is jealous because of another character's interaction. Very loose, very easy to touch on. Further down, it might say, something very specific, like we were talking about the amulet. The amulet has to have all of its properties laid out so that the character can figure out why X, Y, and Z has been happening during the plot. But it's just a general to-do list of what I need to have happen so that I can write around it without feeling stuck.
That is brilliant. I took a little workshop with two incredible writers, Anna Maria Crum and Hilary Bell. And their advice is, because I write fantasy, so there's going to be magic, I need to have a Bible of what the rules of the magic are. Magic always has to have rules. There can never be gratuitous magic. And magic always has a cost. It can't just, you can't just use magic to fix the problems. It has to come at a price. And so that came from them. And then I on a completely away from magic note, I was thinking about a presentation I heard given by Marie Lu, who is the author of the bestseller Legend in the Legend series. And she doesn't plot, she's a pantser, but she says what she does is spends 3 months, maybe 2 or 3 months, making character Bibles. So she gets to know every character in her book inside and out. Who's this character's best friend? What do they have hidden in their drawer? What's the secret that only their best friend knows? What do they think of their parents? And it goes on and on and on. And it's a thick list, a dossier on every character in her book. And then after spending 2 to 3 months on that, then she starts writing.
I like how there's a variety of approaches that you can take towards getting to the end, because there's no one size fits all writing approach.
Exactly.
Who was it? Was it George R.R. Martin who had said that when coming up with characters, because a lot of his characters are gray characters, they're neither good nor bad, but the inherently evil characters don't think that they're evil. They're the hero for the other side.
Haha, that's brilliant. Yeah,
I
exactly.
kind of like looking at it like that. I like the gray character approach, because when you've got characters who are very questionable, you don't know whether they're good or bad. It adds that layer of mystery to the story.
Well, it has been a fantastic show tonight. Thank you so much for joining us, Kim.
Thank you so much, Katie and Jason.
Thank you again for joining us tonight. We will be back next week with another episode of Spilling Ink, the talk show that takes you behind the scenes in the publishing world. Have a good night, everybody.